The domain is the set of all possible input values. The range is the set of all possible output values. The way I remembered domain and range when I first learned it was alphabetical order. I thought of it in terms of X and Y. X comes before Y in the alphabet, and domain comes first in the alphabet, and range comes second. Reasonable domain is all the input values that make sense in a given scenario. We represent domain and range often using something called interval notation. The interval notation uses endpoints to represent a string of unlistable numbers. Now, for those endpoints, we use certain grouping symbols to represent whether or not those endpoints are actually included in our list. The first grouping symbol is parentheses, looks like this. And this is used when an endpoint is not included. When we first learned inequalities, less than, greater than, we often used an open circle to represent when an endpoint was not included. This was used when we had strictly less than or strictly greater than. We also use parentheses when it goes towards positive or negative infinity. That's because the infinities are not actually numbers, so they can't be an endpoint that's included. Brackets that look like this, they're kind of squared off. They're used when an endpoint is included. This is used anytime we would use a closed circle that's colored in, or less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. We also have a union symbol, looks like a big U, and we use this when there is more than one interval that is a solution or is part of a domain or a range. So in example E, we have two graphs, A and B. Let's focus on graph A first. When we are looking at the domain and range, one thing that might help is to visualize a box that encloses the entire function. So we're going to look from all the values from left to right for our domain first. All of the x's used there go from 0 to 5. So those are our endpoints. 0, 5. Now we have to figure out what kind of grouping symbols we would use. Well, for 0, notice the point up at top has an open circle, and so that means that point is not included. So for 0, we would use parentheses. When we go out to the 5, that point has a colored in circle, a closed circle, so that means we would use a bracket. For our range, we're going to look up and down. And we always start down. That is one thing about interval notation. Make a note. When you write your interval notation, it has to be in a particular order. It always goes either left to right, or you can consider it from small to large. When we're dealing with y's, that would be bottom to top, because negatives are smaller than the positives. So in our range, the y values start down at -2. So -2, and it goes all the way up to 4. Now, 4, that's the same point where we had the open circle, so we know the 4 here is going to have parentheses. So now it looks like the point at 3, -2, the lowest point on that graph, is included. Even though they did not give us an open circle or a closed circle, it is on that point, so we would use a bracket for the -2. So our range goes from -2, which is included, up to 4, not included. Now let's look at example B, where we have two segments here. And again, you work left to right. So for our domain of the first line segment there, we start at -7 on the x, and it's a closed circle, so the -7 is included. We use a bracket. And it goes all the way to the right where x is 0, but that point is not included. And then notice there's a little gap and it picks up again at x equals 3. This is where we would use the union symbol. It's like saying we have this interval, or we could do this interval as far as our domain goes. So we have -3 not included. So we use parentheses, but then we have an arrow, which means it goes on and on forevermore towards the right. So we go towards positive infinity. So with the range, oddly enough, we only need one interval here. So notice the y values have kind of a stopping point up here at a +5, but their lowest value continues to go down and down towards -infinity. Here's the tricky part with the range. We always start with the lowest value. So going from bottom to top, there is no lowest point. So we start with parentheses, the -infinity, and then we go up all the way to the number 5, but 5 is not included. So we use parentheses.